business. So today's panel brings together 4 exceptional CFOs. These people know firsthand what it means to deliver performance through both basics and beyond, which goes to the title of this panel. So I'll begin introducing from your right to left. Deborah Lynch is a CFO of Spartan. Many of you are probably familiar or have done Spartan races. She is an experienced CFO and finance operator from Thermo Fisher Scientific to Veolia. And since 2024, she's been leading the finance efforts at Spartan. Bruce Bowden is the CFO of Rocket Software. He's a former CFO and strategy leader at Bottomline, Nuance, and he's a BCG alumnus. And he brings a unique blend of finance, M&A, and strategic scaling experience to the company. Chris Menard is the CFO of Gordon Brothers. He's a veteran finance leader across fintech, software, including IPOs at Bright Cove and Faith Forward. And lastly is Jeff Polton, who's the CFO of Alnylam Pharmaceuticals. He's formerly CFO of Shire and Indigo Agriculture. And at Alnylam, he helped scale one of the most innovative biotech companies in that sector. So together we're going to explore how finance leaders can identify these new opportunities and also think about how they process the next leap beyond and incremental improvements in their businesses. And what I'll do is start with a couple of questions to set the stage, and halfway through the time we'll open up the floor in the audience to questions for Q&A. And without further ado, let's just dive in. And to kick off, what I'd like to do is ask each of you sort of a general question to kind of frame what we mean by business basics and beyond. And so we talked about something in one of our prep sessions about Performance Plus and unlocking value from business basics. And from that perspective, what's the area most often underestimated by leadership teams?
I'm happy to start. Such a pleasure to be here, everybody. Nice to meet you. As Noel said, I'm the CFO of Spartan Races. And at Spartan, when I joined a year and a half ago, I walked into an organization that had been seriously impacted by the pandemic. And so they were sort of trying to navigate through that without any financial leadership. And so, they brought me in to help them with their financial discipline and setting up new systems and processes and getting them back on track again. And we're in the middle of the transformation still. We're getting there, which is awesome. But to answer the question, I think one of the things that we've talked about as a panel and some of our preparation, I don't know if it's Jeff, but said operations was incredibly important to make sure that we really understand what our folks are doing out there. Like, as the CFO, I think of it as an upside-down wedding cake where you have the smaller portion of the cake as being your operations, where you have to really understand what's on your balance sheet, not only what's on your income statement, making sure you're managing cash, making sure you have your clean data. So just your day-to-day. And I think that is the piece, for me, that you really have to make sure they are indexing on when you're just getting back to the fundamentals, which is what the panel is about today. And I think the middle layer of that cake is more around the systems or the people aspect of the business, right? Coming into an organization, we've heard from so many panel members today, the importance of people and how you have to know when to circulate people in and out of the business. But I think that is the middle portion of that wedding cake of how I think about it. And then at the top, as CFOs, in this dynamic role, not only you're in the middle and you're managing all these people, but you've got all these strategic things that you need to be thinking about, such as, how do you optimize on capital, right? How do you make sure that you have the necessary components of the business to keep it running in times of crisis? So that's how I think about it. I think mainly it's really making sure you understand what's really going on in your financial operations, make sure you know what's really on your balance sheets. And that's one of the things that I have uncovered in this experience walking into this company.
I'll pick up on that a little bit. one of the things that I've noticed going into a couple of the companies that I've been in is they're inevitably doing something that's pretty wrong or pretty old, and they don't realize it. I was interviewing for a job a couple of companies ago, and the general counsel interviewed me, and she was trying to explain it to me, and she said, it's kind of like a lost tribe of the Amazon. They're perfectly happy, but they're living out in the middle of a jungle with no indoor plumbing, and they don't realize it. And I think it's an interesting role for a CFO to observe where those missing things or those outdated practices are actually manifesting in large-scale financial underperformance, because that's more the sweet spot of our job, right? It's not necessarily our job to second guess what's happening operationally across the entire business, but I think it is our place to say, yeah, this is old, but it's also just really hurting us.
Fair. I think because the start of the question was the basics, right? So if you think about the basics, first, our job is to partner with the businesses, right? So like, obviously the foundation of that is the accounting. We have to close the books in a certain number of days. We have to do that every single month. But then when we work with, and Gordon Brothers has about 10 different lines of business, and they are all very unique and different. But we have a certain set of reports that we give each of those lines of business every month. And they have to come out on a certain day, because those lines of business, they need those reports to run their day-to-day operations. So reliability is step one for me in terms of the basics. I tell my team, if you are 3 days late, we might make bad decisions, right? Because they are relying on us, not just for the information and what's in that spreadsheet, like they need the trends. They're making decisions every day off of that. So I think it's the predictability and the reliability of being a true business partner, as opposed to, yeah, we'll get the reports out when we get the reports out, and the books will get closed in time for the next close to start. Like, the close is table stakes. Like, that's just the starting point.
I would say, based on my experience at Alnylam over the last 6 to 7 years, I think one of the things that was really important from a basics perspective was establishing a very clear goal of where we were trying to take the business. So when I got to the company, we were just launching our first product, and we were losing about $700 million a year at that point. And we made a commitment internally first that we were going to get the company to profitability over a 5-year period, and then we made that goal public, right? And I think making that goal public created a level of accountability within the organization that was very critical to getting us to profitability. We're going to be profitable this year, and I'm absolutely certain we would not be profitable had we not made that commitment publicly, because it forced decisions to be made in terms of trade-offs. And so, very basic concept, but really important in terms of driving performance.
Does it open you up to any concerns, though? I mean,
Yeah, look, as a CFO, when you're making a commitment to profitability over a period of time, when there's risks associated with that, sure. I mean, that was anxiety-inducing, but really important. I think, as everybody knows, when you make a commitment to the markets, you need to deliver, right? And I think that's why this happened, right? If we had not had that commitment and that forcing function, honestly, I don't think we'd be where we are today.
so how have you balanced cost discipline with, ambition, like growth ambition in your business, particularly in uncertain market conditions like we have right now?
I'll start. I think that investment in your cost structure has to trail growth. I think a lot of companies get out ahead of future growth that is expected and get overinvested. For my company, at least, we're in the software industry. About 75% of our cost structure is people, and no one wants to have to fire people. So that means one of your biggest levers, if not your biggest lever, is hiring people. And so, a couple of companies in a row that I've come into where the growth trajectory was ambitious but uncertain, the first thing you have to do is really get control of hiring.
Yeah, I think we're similar. So we're a deal shop, so we're definitely people-based. And we're in growth mode. We've done 6 acquisitions over the last 2 years, but we've also brought in a couple teams. So we call those incubating businesses, which basically means we're lifting a team with no revenue, basically on day one, and letting them grow within Gordon Brothers. And so we are very model driven. So we are hiring enough people to get that business started, and then there are literally checkpoints every 90 days. Are we going to hire the next wave? Are we on track? And on track could be a couple of different things. We purchased a software company a year ago, and so on track is the code where it's supposed to be for the next wave of developers. If it's not, if it's a professional services organization, is the utilization rates where they're supposed to be to go get the next wave of services people? So I think as long as you're metrics driven and you stay true to the metrics, you can keep yourself on track. But if the first time you waver and say, oh, I'm a little bit off, but like I think I'm going to catch up, but I'm going to go higher anyway, you can get yourself sideways.
I think for me, it's about choosing the areas that drive growth to make sure you're leaving space to invest in those. And there's other parts of the business that are not growth drivers where you need to be more disciplined. So for us, that was the corporate functions. We've established goals to be, we did some peer benchmarking where we looked at the top quartile, most efficient metrics, and we've said that's where we want to be in the corporate functions. And we've been very disciplined about staying there to make room to invest in R&D, to make room to invest in commercial as we're launching new products. I think so. You got to pick your spots where you want to tighten the screws to make room for the areas that you want to invest for growth.
And I think I would add that, I spent a lot of my career in much larger Fortune 500 type companies where cost reduction exercises were transactional. And so coming into Spartan, kind of applying those lessons learned, I didn't always get the outcome that I had anticipated. As we did a fabulous job keeping profitable, but we were sort of cannibalizing the operation as we were reducing our costs and really impacting negatively the consumer experience, right? And so I really think you can't just think of cost on its own. You've got to really look at it with top line and get creative about, if your cost structure is X, well, what can you do differently to create the capital that you need to run the company? So I just think I can't think of one without the other at this time. And so what we're doing is diversifying our products and being creative about how we generate and increase capital.
And Deborah, kind of taking off, or I guess stepping off from where you just finished, each of you are in very different industries, and so maybe it might help also when you answer the next question to give a sentence to put it in context. But we talked about cost discipline, but where has pricing discipline come into the game, and how do you balance that with top line growth? Like, or perhaps has pricing discipline in some instances provided more value than top line growth itself?
Want me to start? I mean, so I'm in the biotech space, and 10 years ago in biotech and pharma, you had the ability to grow your top line by taking aggressive price increases. I think I remember at my time at Shire, probably half of our growth was pricing, half of it was volume. That's not the world we're in anymore from a pricing perspective in biotech. I mean, there's been changes imposed on the industry, frankly, which were probably necessary. So the ability to take price increases, aggressive price increases, is just not there anymore. So that's not a lever to drive growth. So really the companies that are best positioned to drive growth longer term by volume and demand are the ones that are bringing innovative therapies to market, which is the way it should be. And so that's really what we've been focused on at Alnylam, is to drive innovation, right? That puts you in position to drive top line growth. Pricing's just not that lever anymore.
So I'll give you two examples. One of our businesses is a lending business. And Gordon Brothers we're asset specialists, so we believe we really understand the value of the hard asset. So we'll tend to go into stickier situations behind a traditional lender, with the thought process being if a company falls over, we'll be at the back end and we'll help clean it up. So if you're from Massachusetts, we've been involved in deals like Party City and Big Lots and Joann's Fabrics over the last 12 months. And so when you think about lending, you can drive revenue if you do more loans, right? But pricing is really important in the loan. And anyone who tells you if you've lent enough, occasionally some of those loans are going to go badly. But you have to price appropriately for the risk, right? And so we are very disciplined about the pricing of our loans and the risk matrix. And so we grid it. What's the risk profile? What's the risk rating? What should that pricing be? To make sure we kind of stay in track.
So my company, Rocket, is in enterprise software. It's a 35-year-old company. And the software that we provide is for long tenured systems like mainframe. And so in many instances, our product, even if it's software, has been in place for 10 or 20 or 30 years, and it's extremely sticky. Dovetailing to the values conversation we had earlier today with Robert, our company's core values are empathy, humanity, trust, and love, which when I first heard it, I found unusual. I've come to really value and appreciate them, even though Robert would say most of those aren't compliant with his standards, but they do actually manifest in the company in a really good way. One way in which they manifested that I think wasn't as good was pricing, because we always positioned vis-a-vis our competitors as kind of the kinder, gentler company. When someone came up for their renewal on their maintenance on their software, which happened every year for decades, we would be in the sort of cost of living plus zone. Some of our competitors, where they felt like they had a really sticky position, would charge 20 or 30 or 50% price increases and get away with it, basically. When I came into the company 3.5 years ago, we had no pricing function to speak of. So the first thing I did was hire a head of pricing out of a little boutique consultancy called Simon Kucher that does a very good job with pricing for anyone who's looking for that kind of thing. They didn't pay me for the plug. But he came in and we sort of said, well, we're only asking for 6% in most of our products. Why don't we go for 8 or 10 or 12? And people said, that's just not what we do here. It's just the market won't bear it. Customers won't accept it. So we commissioned primary research and went out and actually determined the elasticity across our top dozen products, which make up about 80% of our revenue. And it turned out that elasticity was hugely variable across the different products. Some of them you could only get away with 4%, and some of them you could do 12%. And so we put in a tiered price increase structure last year for the first time, and we had 0 customer pushback. So I think it's just a question when it comes to pricing of acknowledging that it's a legitimate lever. I told Brad, who I hired, that I expected him to be the highest ROI hire in the history of the company, and so far he's off to a really good start. But the money just drops straight to the bottom line, and you just need to have the proficiency and the data centrism to execute it.
Yeah. And I think for Spartan, it's really interesting dynamic if you think about how the finances are for an event. Once you get to a certain amount of participants, it's all revenue to the bottom line, right? So it's about getting racers there. And I think one of the things we learned is when we lost a lot of people in this room, I've asked, hey, have you done a Spartan event before? And they're like, oh, no, I can't do one of those. People don't realize it's for the common person, too. It's not just for the elites. So if you haven't done one, you should certainly sign up. But I think that what we found was that the return racer had really gotten negatively impacted during the pandemic. People got soft, they were on their couches, we didn't get a lot of those racers back. And those are the people that were in the system, that were passionate about our product. And so what we are now seeing is a transformation in that we're getting a lot of new racers coming. But the price point of the ticket of the new racer was much more discounted than the ones of the elite racers that were already committed and bought into the product. And so, that's sort of a quick, when we got in there and got into the data, right? What we're talking about here is really getting in and really understanding your operations. And we recognized that this was what was happening. We stopped discounting the new racer ticket prices, and we're seeing a lot better return because the new racers aren't looking for that discount. They're, wanting to see what it's about, and they want to get it in there. And then, then it's about us trying to get them converted into the return racer. So, pricing is really important, and be very intentional, I think, is the word that comes to mind about how you do your pricing in what areas.
So in the past 3 years of tighter markets, 2 or 3 years, what would you say have been the innovations in cash and capital management that have been most impactful to your businesses?
Maybe I'll start. I don't know that it's innovative. It certainly probably it isn't innovative, but I think what we did when we needed to refinance some debt that we had outstanding as we looked at our options, and one of the things we wanted to avoid, if possible, was diluting current shareholders, and we would also wanted to avoid the current interest rate environment if we could. So we decided to issue convertible debt, which allowed us to potentially avoid equity dilution and certainly tap the markets at a much lower interest rate than we would have otherwise been able to if we'd issued straight debt. So that was a successful security for us during that period.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we've done anything all that innovative. We're very global. We have done a lot around our transfer pricing to try to maximize taxes in foreign jurisdictions, to try to preserve cash, as opposed to actually doing anything on the refinancing side, which has helped us out a lot.
We're a privately held, highly leveraged company. We have $5.2 billion worth of debt. And so I think the biggest thing we've done is try to align the quantum of our euro and dollar denominated debt to align to our operational cash flow generation so that we're sort of like naturally hedged for one of our single largest expenses, which is interest.
Yeah, and similar, I think, for Spartan, look, they've been cash challenged since the pandemic, and the way we've responded to this situation is getting back to basics, and it's back to the operations. The founder of this company, his name's Joe DeCina. He's pretty remarkable. If you guys don't know him, you should look him up. He started this business in his backyard. We run 260 events worldwide in 44 countries. We get 2 million runners a year or participants. And when he started this company, we didn't do a lot of the things that we're doing today. We got fat and happy, so to speak, right? We weren't managing it well. So it was really just looking at our operations and saying, how could we do this before without, some of these cost structure that we had? So we've had to be very intentional to be able to generate enough revenue to be able to run organically again. And it's been a lot of hard work, but we're getting there, and it's really exciting.
So AI is touching everybody's lives, be it both personal and professional. And it's obviously reshaping finance functions from forecasting to fraud detection. Where do you see the real near-term value of AI in your businesses?
I'll go first. My firm's over 120 years old. 18 months ago, we couldn't spell AI. So let's start there. So I'm going to start with what we've done as a firm and kind of bring it in. So, and legitimately, 18 months ago, we had basically nothing. We had some people playing a little bit. So we've held a bunch of innovation days. And innovation day is when we shut down the firm for 2 or 3 hours in a region. And we've set up tracks. Like, you're new to AI, you're a little advanced, or you're someone who just wants to read about it. And once you pick your track, we give you tools. So if you say you're new to AI, we give you Copilot or GPT, we give you templates and files, and it's very scripted. You go off and you play, and you see what's possible. If you have some experience, we give you slightly better tools, but you've told us what you kind of want to accomplish, and we have something there to help you. And then that third one is really for the executives who don't want to take part in the first 2 tracks. And so we're trying to get people up to speed as quickly as possible. And then within each of our groups, we've had a third party come in, and each group has nominated 2 or 3 people, and we're trying to get super users trained in every single group who are like leading the charge within the group about what's possible. And then we've put tools up in the background so that I can see if our usage is going up. So for example, I know last month that we used Copilot roughly 10,000 times. And I watch it to see if it's getting better, if it's going up every month. And we're just trying to get people to use it as much as possible. There's no wrong, right? And so we're just encouraging as much as possible. And we put in all the right policies and procedures, and we're making sure the data is not leaking outside of our environment and all the stuff you're supposed to do first. But for us, it's all about advocating it's okay. No one's going to lose their job because of AI, but you might lose your job if you don't learn how to use AI, is what we're saying internally.
On the finance side at Alnylam, I would say we're just dabbling with it a little bit. I mean, I think there's some efficiencies that we've gotten, some of the transactional back office kinds of areas. The IR team maybe is using it to generate first drafts of scripts for earnings calls, things like that. But no, I don't think it's anything transformative in finance. In the business, the areas that we're looking at it from a strategic perspective are on the research side of the house. Like, can we speed up discovery of new medicines? And I think on the commercial side, they're using it to try and identify patients faster. I can't tell you that there's an ROI on any of that yet, but that's where we're focusing. I find actually where we spend the most time talking about AI is at the executive level, and there's a FOMO associated with it. I would say it's we'll talk about what we're doing, and then 6 or 8 weeks later, somebody will say, "Are we doing enough in AI?" Right? There's just a lot of that fear that we're somehow missing out on this. Again, I would say we're at the experimental stage.
We're in our, like many of you, we're in our fiscal 26 planning process right now, and our board and our CEO and I identified AI as one of the high priorities across all of our teams, and so we tasked everyone with that and put a kind of project manager in charge of it. And lo and behold, like a week later, it came back to me like, "What are you going to do?" And I hadn't anticipated that fully. But I did the intelligent thing. I asked all my directs to think about it. And actually yesterday morning for an hour, we met and went through the 10 ideas that they came up with across Treasury, tax, FP&A, accounting and control, pricing, procurement, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll just say, like, I don't go through all 10 because you'd be bored, well, you might not be bored, but it's too long. The top 2 that I thought, that I heard as ideas, and so that gives you an idea where we are in this, but one goes back to pricing. It was basically competitive intelligence gathering on pricing, just to make sure that actually your sales teams and your pricing team know everything that is even in the public or mostly public domain that there is to know about how to price something that you're selling against a competitor. I think that's pretty compelling. And the other one was around automation and AI for receivables, collections, creditworthiness, that whole kind of domain. I thought that was pretty compelling too. The trouble we're having is knowing exactly who are the right vendors for all of these things, and there's an incredible dispersity of vendors across the different use cases. Plus, you have all your traditional vendors who are baking in AI functionality, and you don't always even know what Salesforce has or Oracle has or whoever. So I think figuring out what they have to offer is a big part of it as well. And then above all, like, what is the real cost benefit analysis of this? How do I put a real number on a reduction of day sales outstanding because of AI's application to receivables, or elimination of bad debt, or that sort of thing? It's could be a lot of fun with Excel, but there is value captured for sure.
One of the things Bruce said I think is a good point, and I agree with. I think that all the tools that we're using are starting to bake AI into it. So we don't need to build our own AI functionality that's going to be there. What we're trying to focus on is getting our data organized in a way so that we can take advantage of these things. And I think where we are at Alnylam, that's more of our focus, is organizing the data and making sure the data is clean.
Yep. The other thing I forgot to mention, we also are running our own versions. It's Shark Tank ripoff, but we call it Innovation Tank, where we have people coming and they're submitting ideas to a council, and then certain ideas are getting pitched. And it's a little bit different than Shark Tank, because if you think about Shark Tank, someone comes and they pitch their business, and you know their revenues and you know the profitability, and you're going to write a check. But people have come with these great ideas, and before we can say yes or no, we actually have to go off and figure out how much it's going to cost. So some of the ideas that have come to us actually cost millions of dollars, and we're like, that's a great idea, but it's going to take 2 years and cost too much, and we're going to put that aside. But we've actually funded 2 of the ideas that came to us from our employees. Some of them are productivity, some of them are really not really AI, it's more just coding, but they're productivity ideas. But the more you encourage the employees and you have forums for them to bring you ideas, we're finding that's the best way to find stuff, because as an executive team, we're not going to find things. Like,
Do they get prizes?
We're too far removed. What'd you say?
Do they get prizes?
Everyone who submits an idea gets a prize, and then the winners get better prizes.
Not bad. If you had to give one guiding principle to CFOs for the next 12 to 18 months, what's the most powerful kind of basic and beyond lever that they should focus on?
Maybe I'll start. I mean, I don't know that I can remember a time when there was so much uncertainty geopolitically in terms of impacting the business. I think within our space, tariffs, most favored nation pricing is a really, really big deal for the industry. And things are changing sometimes literally by the day as it relates to these kinds of topics. And so I think agility, kind of scenario planning, really, really important right now for businesses, and not just in biotech and pharma, but that's something that we've spent a lot of time talking about.
Yeah, I think to build off of that, because we're all going through budget season, right? The only thing we know about our budgets is that they're wrong. And they're probably wrong a week after we finish them. And so I would say flexibility, right? What I tell my team is, if we can hit the top line and we can hit the bottom line, forget about the categories on the top and the bottom, everything in the middle doesn't matter at the end of the year. Right? Our job is to try to keep us on track for those two metrics to the best that we can. And that means we have to be flexible. If one business unit's overperforming and one's underperforming, we got to figure out how to balance off the expense within those worlds. So I would say just being flexible and looking at the organization as a whole.
Comes to mind for me is sprint planning. I think that we have a lot of great ideas in our company, and then we sort of overcommit and then don't execute well. So I think oftentimes it's about taking some of these good concepts, whether it be AI related, as an example for digital advertising. You know, we started to use AI and doing a lot of images that were sort of cartoon-like, and the consumer really backlashed at us because they're like, those aren't real people, right? And they wanted to see real people in our advertising, not cartoon images of like Spartans. So it was a good idea, but it didn't work well for our consumer base. So I think no matter what you're doing, whether it's an advertising activity or it's a finance activity or supply chain, you know, we got hit hard with the tariffs. We do a lot of our collateral purchasing out of China, and for a small company, that really can have a major impact on you. So we had to, you know, quickly pivot and find other areas to do it economically, right? So start small, but if it, you know, if it's the outcome that you want, then keep building on it. But I wouldn't go all in on something. I would just do a lot of sprint experiments on things.
I think the most important thing for the next 18 months is around the intersection of finance and HR, which is basically workforce strategy. And that's because of the geopolitical environment. It's because of the pressure that AI and other automation is going to put on our cost structures, and our cost structures in many cases are dominated by the cost of high-priced labor in Western markets. So just as a couple of examples, 5 years ago, we determined as a company to get out of Russia. We had 40 people in Russia. We picked the 12 or 13 that we thought were the best, and we relocated them into the Netherlands. A year and a half ago, we decided to get completely out of China. We had 60 software developers there. We picked the 15 best ones and moved them to Bentonville, Arkansas. That's pretty interesting culture. You'd be surprised at how well it's going. I was there yesterday. They're doing fine. Their kids are killing our kids in school, though. They're all our kids, but you know what I mean. But I think the deliberateness about where your people count footprint is super important and going to be more important. We have a pretty big office in Vilnius in Lithuania, which is close enough to Russia to really give it some serious thought. For now, we're sticking with it, but the next time we want to build a low-cost engineering facility, do we want that to be in? We had some people in Ukraine as well, but Poland or one of the other adjacent, maybe marginally more at-risk countries there. Like, I think you have to be very, 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 very cautious about that right now. I think the usual deterrents for preventing your business from being disrupted in those markets are much reduced.
Great. So perhaps we can open it up to the audience just to make sure we're fielding some of the questions that people have out there for our panel. Yes?
Can I get a mic?
Oh, is there a mic?
I don't shout.
I think there's one coming. So I'll wait for the mic, and I'll definitely come to you first. One of the things I find fascinating about all this is you're all in these very sort of different, disparate businesses. But one thing that's coming through is just the role of the CFO in many companies that I speak to, and also in what I'm hearing from all of yours, is far more strategic than it is sort of financial/accounting. I think when you go through school, you think it's the finance function is this very regimented kind of, columnar-focused role. And then you start to realize it's really how do you drive and grow a business from a point where you have some reflection on finance, but not solely, you're not confined to it. So I don't know how much you agree with that, or perhaps it's even more. But if you have any thoughts, please feel free.
I mean, I fully agree. I think the average CFO role scope has expanded over the past couple of decades and even the past 5 years, and now typically includes corporate development, strategy, in my case, like a big part of sales operations, revenue operations for us. So I think anywhere where we can bring a level of discipline that is rooted in the overall performance of the company to areas where sometimes it's just handled a lot more kind of artistically or artisanally, and there's value.
Yeah, I think of it, we're kind of the source of truth, no matter what the metric.
Yeah.
Whether that's right or wrong, people just assume if it comes from finance, it's right. And so part of that is thinking about what the system is where you get the metric. So the example I usually use is someone said, how many customers do you have? Where do you go get that? If I go to salesforce.com, half of those people aren't customers, right? They might have been at one point, maybe they're not now, maybe they're just contacts. So it's where do I get the information and how do I publish that information? But it's definitely more than just the numbers, because like I know our groups are in charge of all the metrics for the company.
Look, I think the most important attribute for a successful CFO is a deep understanding of the business that they're supporting. For me, we're a biotech business, so we're making decisions on whether to invest or not in a clinical trial. We're making decisions on how much to invest in a new product that we've launched. Do we open up an office in Australia? Those kinds of things. And again, what makes a CFO successful is the ability to be part of the conversation of those decisions and influence those decisions, hopefully to the right financial outcome for the business. And you can't do that if you just know the numbers. You have to be able to speak the language, I think, to influence your peers when you're making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah. And I think for me, this being my first true CFO experience, I think that just being super disciplined, being very intentional with what I'm trying to do, and just being kind-hearted along the way, having to make tough decisions, but do it in a way that are respectful of the impact to others. And I think one of the biggest things is I've had to get through this transformation with very little capital, and so I think I've really had to rely heavily on a lot of people believing in the mission, and I think it's just leading by example and showing people what good look like. I haven't always been able to have people with the skill level that I needed, but I think that sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and dig in and show them what good looks like, and then it's a win for all. So.
Great.
Jeff, I'm from the biotech sector, so this question is for you. Firstly, congratulations on the incredible success Alnylam has had with Amvuttra and then a very deep pipeline that you have built. Pharma is not known for great R&D productivity. We have seen so many case studies, right, where it's very difficult to really get high R&D productivity. You have a very deep pipeline of these assets, and you will be spending a lot of money on clinical trials. Yeah. How are you thinking about capital allocation that can essentially improve R&D productivity, where you can maintain or improve the margin and then not get into the margin erosion problem that most of your peers have? I used to be at Takeda, that's why, and then I worked on that problem, so would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Maybe just a little bit for those in the room that don't know about Alnylam. It's about a 25-year-old biotech here in Boston that's founded really on a singular technology called RNA interference. The company pioneered the use of this technology, and it took probably 15 years to really figure out the technology and whether or not it was worthwhile. Turns out that it is. And so I think the key to the success of R&D productivity for the company is every medicine, we got 6 medicines in the market now, they all use the same underlying fundamental technology. Everything that's in the pipeline uses that same technology. So we understand that very deeply. And the things that we choose to invest in are based on genetic validation. So we know if there's a gene that's producing something that's causing a disease, and we can turn that off with our technology, there's a very high probability that that's going to work. So we've continued to focus on that as a result. And primarily, we're going to continue to invest in that technology. Now, it's becoming much more competitive with our success. There's a lot of other people that are now investing in this technology as well, so we have to move fast. We have to sort of, invest a lot to get to new tissues first. I think the other thing that we'll start to dabble in just a little bit is probably external innovation, but primarily the capital allocation is going to be on that platform because we've had so much success with it and it's got a very high bar. We've been fortunate.
Any others in the room? Perhaps I'll seed another question. So I think it was Bruce maybe that touched on leveraging your people, I believe. But all of you in some way, shape, or form talked about that. When you look across functions, how do you diagnose when talent is underutilized and perhaps better redeployed someplace else to drive growth?
Like, we're kind of lucky in some areas that a big piece of our people is a services business. So utilization rates don't lie, right? So like, that's pretty easy. We look at utilization rates every week. And you can cross-train people from one services team to another services team. And we understand the pipeline. And a lot of our business, about 60% of our services business, we do a lot of valuation works for asset-backed lenders, is repeat. So I have a good feel for what's coming up the next quarter. So if I see a slowdown in one group and I can kind of get a feel for what's coming, we can get people trained in that area and we can redeploy.
I think I maybe touched on it earlier a little bit about philosophically how we're trying to manage where we invest in terms of headcount at the company. I would say, generally speaking, we're trying to be very disciplined in SG&A, particularly in the corporate functions, and I've found that you need targets. You need something to try and manage to. I mentioned we did some benchmarking and we set a goal to be in the top quartile of efficiency. So we've got targets, headcount targets as the business grows for the corporate functions, and we've managed to that. That really helps. I think on the commercial side too, typically, again, this is a little bit of a generalization, but the commercial organization typically asks for more than they need. And so we've, again, squeezed there a little bit. In the commercial side, I've got much more time and energy for investments for field-based personnel than I do home office personnel. So that's a sort of a bias that we have. And we and I try to leave as much headcount investment for the R&D side of the organization, primarily because of the efficiency that we've had in the technology that we've got. I want to put as much money into that as I possibly can. And so you have to have the rest of the operation as efficient as you can. And that's sort of philosophically how we've managed the business.
The way you phrased it, Noel, was how do you make sure you're utilizing, your I think you said utilizing your best people. To me, I think that's generally not the problem. The best people in a company, from my experience, tend to get oversubscribed. If anything, work finds them, whether it's an M&A deal or a business process change or something. They will be utilized. To me, it's more a question of where are you finding the inefficiency in a company, especially as it gets bigger. We're up to about 3,500 people, and that's beyond the point where the CEO and the executive leadership team have visibility deep enough into the organization to find where the pockets of inefficiency actually are. You start to rely on the N-2 and the N-3, and very often that gets into layers of folks who are basically, their first motivation is to protect their team, not to identify inefficiency. So it's a little bit of a tricky problem to solve. I think that it's easier. It's easier to determine where the value creation is and isn't happening among teams the closer you get to the customer. So like sales teams, for example, it's pretty easy, right? They get their quota. Are they hitting their quota? Are they not hitting their quota? Maybe there's a few reasons if not, but generally speaking, it's pretty clear. Customer services and delivery, you were just talking about utilization rates. That's pretty easy to watch. As you get further and further back into support functions, for us, even our R&D, about more than half of our people are in R&D, and some of that is very directly contributory to innovation and growth and stickiness with our customers, and some of it just isn't. And so that's a hard area to mine, and also like our IT teams and all of our support teams, harder to gauge efficiency. But I think that's where inefficiency, I think the further away you get from the customer, the easier it is for inefficiency to hide. So that's where I try to dig a little.
With regards to Spartan, when I joined, there was a common statement that was made at the organization and being one of Joe's friends. And so when I got there, I was hearing it day after day. I'm like, who are these friends of Joe's? And Joe has a big heart. When they were coming out of the pandemic and we needed to source the company, he was just hiring people. You got an A in algebra in high school, great, you'd be a great accountant. And he was bringing people in. And so I got to the company, had all these really nice people that had no skills. And so that's what I think about. It's a little bit less about efficiency in my mind, but it's important. But I think having the right people, the right skill set, and the right mindset. I think we talked about this in some other the panels, but look, when you're going through a transformation, going through something tough, it might not be the right. They might have good skills, but they still might not be the right fit. So I think it's skills with the right mindset are both super important, and I think that will address efficiency.
And I'm mindful of like these questions here, and I'll come to you in the back, or frankly, you haven't had an opportunity to hear or read these before, so I appreciate your candor. I think there was somebody, just one of those tables back there.
Hi everyone, my name is Prachi and I'm from TriNetX. We provide real-world data to big pharma companies for clinical trials. My question is around the budgeting and forecasting process. It's one of the most frustrating process for the whole company. Every year and every quarter that we have to go through. So what are your ideas and processes that you have incorporated in your companies, and what are you trying to improve in those processes?
I'll go first. We try not to overstress the budget process because going back to my earlier comments, it's wrong. We reforecast at the end of every quarter. Every time we reforecast, we take it out for another 90 days. So the budget is really just a formalization for the board. At that point, we've built most of the next year. We keep a 3- and 5-year model up to date all the time, so we're constantly tweaking based on what's going on in the market. And so when we get to the budget process, we're really negotiating over quotas and formalizing a headcount plan and getting into a presentation that we can get it through the board. Our budget process takes about 7 weeks. And I've heard someone this morning say it takes like 6 months. That is way too long, in my opinion.
I was listening to Jeff's answer to the question about biotech R&D and empathizing with you because you often make decisions about things that are very far from generating their first dollar of revenue, which is tough. Our situation is different. We have 3 business units and 12 lines of business and about 60 products. So even though the top 12 are 80%, there's a long tail of other stuff. And they're all in different places in terms of their financial profiles. So to make our planning process smoother, the first thing we do is portfolio assessment and basically do a contribution margin as deeply as we can at the 60 product level without going into allocations, because allocations are a waste of time and just give people an excuse to complain about the reason their thing doesn't look good is because they got too much of an allocation. But we do push R&D. Our engineers tend to be working on one thing, so that's pretty straightforward. Services and delivery, they tend to be working on one or a limited number of things, or at least what they're working on is very correlated to the revenue that's coming from those things. So we operate at well north of 50% EBITDA margins. But if let's say it's 50% for the sake of argument, out of the 50% that's cost, 40% of that can be assigned, not allocated, not attributed, but assigned to a product. So the first thing we do is push it in and push that data in and hold it up next to the bookings and the growth profile and say, why is this a rule of 23 business and this is a rule of 104 business? And surely that can't make sense. And so it's like a little bit of a dose of truth that happens every September that sends everyone scurrying.
Yeah, I don't think I have any real pearls of wisdom on the budget process. I mean, we do the long-range plan in the spring, and so we'll use the first year of that long-range plan as the start. That's established the targets for the budget. I do think targets are helpful for the organization, right? You have to be willing to adjust those as you get information through the process, but it's a helpful starting place for the business, so we typically do that. And then we just try and spend time talking about the most important things. So product sales, forecast, maybe new things that we're moving into the pipeline. Are we aligned around those? And then headcount. How many and where are we going to add heads? Those are the things that we then typically just try and spend the most time on.
Oh, there's one other thing. Historically, we've asked people to submit their requests. We don't do that
Christmas
anymore.
list?
Yeah, no more Christmas lists. It's more like we figure out what the degrees of freedom are, and then we start with, what do you have to do, or something is going to break, and then ease our way into the degrees of necessity of the Christmas list.
One of the key elements of our planning process is event profitability, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are doing in a certain kind of framework. And I think the one skill that we bring to the table that we all take for granted, we all know this, but one of the things we got in there, and everyone's like, oh, our events are so profitable, right? When we go into the planning process and we build a plan based on holding certain events at certain locations, a certain number of participants, et cetera, and model it out. But what they were missing was the overhead costs associated, and then all of a sudden the events weren't looking so profitable. So, it's just about bringing that skill, that knowledge that we have to the forefront, making sure that people are making good decisions.
So this one's a tough one, unless, did I see any hands up there?
It's going to be tough. Let's find a question from the audience.
Oh, yes, this gentleman over here on the left of the room.
The panel have shared a lot on managing down, managing across, but where are the lessons in managing up, both to the CEO and to the board and to investors?
That was literally the tough, I swear, that was literally the tough question.
Can you repeat the question?
So we talked a lot about managing laterally and down.
Yeah.
Tell us about the challenges of managing upward with the CEO.
I'll start. I think the key, when I took this job a little over 3 years ago, I was comparing to some other opportunities, and it was 100% in the end about the shareholders and the executive leadership team, and especially the CEO. And what I was looking for was a combination of, just raw intellectual horsepower and but yet humility and listening skills, and also complementarity. I would probably not have been that happy to go with a CEO that had been a CFO. I went with CEO who's a software engineer by training, but also kind of a polymath and a genius chess player, good with customers. A lot of the stuff that I just don't do, so it's just very complementary. So in a way, you have to manage less because you're so complementary to one another. And then the only part on the board one is, everyone knows this one already, but you never go into a board meeting unless you already know what the outcome is going to be. So just you and your CEO and the rest of your team have to just preload it.
For me, what was important at Alnylam is when I was hired and I was talking to board members, they were talking about how important it was for the company to build a muscle and a plan to get the company to profitability. So I was hearing very clearly from the board that they wanted that and felt like they needed that. When I talked to the CEO, I wanted to make sure that that's what he wanted too, right? Because I knew I could come in and do that based on the experiences I had, but I knew that would be a very difficult proposition if the CEO wasn't aligned to that goal. The CEO at the time was John Maraganore, and I had a conversation with him about it as we were talking about the role, and it was clear to me he was committed to that, and I knew that would really help me and the job support him. So that's helpful. I think the other thing is you just got to work at the relationship. It's got to be a relationship that's built based on trust, where you can say what you think when you need to think it, and that may need to be privately at times, but that, in my mind, that's the key to the role, and making the role fulfilling and have an ability to have the kind of impact that you want to have. There's some CEOs that want to tell you what they want you to do, and they want your help executing that. There's other CEOs that want to partner, right? And I think that's where the role is really fulfilling, when there's a partnership, and it just takes work.
Our job is not to agree all the time. That's what I think you're saying.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. But it's when we disagree to make sure it's in private, and when we come out of the room to make sure we're aligned. I think, I work with a great CEO. She is a first-time CEO. And we probably agree 95% of the time. But before I took the job, made sure we were clear that it's okay to disagree. Like if you want someone who's just going to say yes to all your ideas, I'm not your person. And sometimes the board, I'm PE backed, so everyone's got a different backing financially. But you have to manage your board and your CEO, and sometimes they're not aligned. And so that can be interesting too. But I totally agree with you on the board meetings. Like the board meeting happens before the board meeting. Like that's just the presentation.
I think about it in two ways. First thing came to mind for me was, how do I get my team to manage up, right? That's one of the biggest things I've struggled with, not only at Spartan, but like in my last 10 years, I think, of really getting people to come in and tell me what the elevator pitch is. Like not send me spreadsheets and have me figure out what tab you're talking about. And so that's one thing I've really been investing a lot of time in my team, is helping them do executive summary, really getting me information much more succinctly. So that's one thing I think of. In terms of the way you asked the question, I think for me, look, it's a private company, it's Joe's baby. I came into a situation where the investors and the board maybe weren't fully aware of our situation, and so I had to find a way to delicately and authentically get people, building trust and getting people to believe in my skills and capabilities so that I could then share with them. It took time, right? I had to really work on it, the right timing and the right, I think, words to use to get everyone on the same page. So it's not something you just kind of do like this. It's something that develops, right? And you have to be very strategic about it with the outcome that you want is bringing everyone together and getting it on the table so that you can elevate together.
And perhaps as we close, and again, I'm thankful for all the questions from the audience and for everybody's participation, but I want to let you all have the last word and share like a nugget or something provocative, whatever thought you want to leave people with, and so like a lightning round of 30 seconds each.
You want to go?
I'm thinking.
I think we should just give these nice people their minute and 45 seconds back and move on to the next session.
I'll do one, just so we don't seem like we have no idea. If you have doubt about personnel decisions, err on the side of acting quickly, because I think that things can fester and it can be really, really toxic for an organization. So when you come in, if you make sure you know what is really going on, but as soon as you know, don't get too sentimental.
Yeah, maybe something I said earlier about deep knowledge of the business. I mean, I think for the function to have influence, it can't just be the CFO that has that, but you got to hire and build a business partner FP&A team that has that. I have found that hiring really good, smart people that really know the business can then really have a broad impact. I would focus on that.
Embrace AI. Try to find 2 or 3 times a week where you're just playing, even if you're just putting in prompts and asking questions. The world is going to be significantly different 2 years from now, 6 months from now, whatever that is. But if we're not playing with it ourselves, we're not going to understand when people come and ask us to spend money.
And I think just in closing, just believe in yourself and your capabilities. You know what they are. I didn't think I would be able to do this role I'm in. A friend and colleague of mine in this room encouraged me to take the role, and there were 3 CFOs before me that couldn't do it, and they're just so pleased with the work I've done. So I never thought I'd be here on stage today doing this. But yeah, so just believe in your skills and keep working hard.
All right. Thank you so much for your candor.
Good job. It's fun. Good job.